The rise of the e-bike has been pretty amazing. In my local mountains, at least 50% of the bikes I see on the trails are electric assist. And even though our listeners are going to have to pedal their way around Leadville, we get it, and so does our title sponsor, Shimano. Many riders have added an e-bike now to their quiver.
I have not yet, although I have been tempted. Shimano builds not one, but two e-bike motors. And to complement the unique needs of an e-bike, Shimano has also developed drivetrain components that can better deal with the torque and the weight of an e-bike.
And on the high-performance end, Shimano has an XT-Di2 group set for e-bikes. Yeah. And the beauty of this system is it can be set up for automatic shifting. It uses rider speed and cadence to determine when shifts should happen. The shifting can also happen without turning the cranks. That's pretty amazing. Can you do manual mode? Absolutely. But that auto shift sounds pretty cool.
I can hardly wait till that trickles down to our pedal bikes. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm just going to go ahead and put that e-bike Di2 on my Leadville race bike, then you are just like me, but you can't. Not quite yet. The XT Di2 runs off the e-bike battery, and it is not compatible with the seat post Di2 battery. There is a mountain bike Di2 system for non-e-bikes, and I did my very fastest time at Leadville ever with the XTR Di2, so highly recommended. The fact is, e-bike systems are a good sign for all of us riders on traditional mountain bikes.
If you are in the market for an e-bike and you really want class-leading shifting on that bike, check out that XT Di2 system at bike.shimano.com, and thanks to Shimano for being the title sponsor of this show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. This is Season 6, Episode 3 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Hottie, Hottie to most.
And I am Fatty, and like a lot of our listeners, I recently got word from the Leadville Race Series that I am in for the 2023 Leadville Trail 100. So this will be my 26th start, hopefully my 25th finish. And I am trying to get myself motivated and trained up. I want to get ready for the HH1 MBR, which is, of course, the acronym for Highest Hardest One Day Mountain Bike Race.
And to help Fatty and all of our listeners come out of hibernation, we have on the show TrainerRoad's Jonathan Lee. JL has been a regular on the show, helping our racers with training plans and race goals. And he's a Leadviller himself, so we look forward to seeing how he's going to get Fatty going.
In addition to getting my body going, soon enough, I'm going to be getting my mountain bike tuned up and ready to go as well. One of the first things I'm going to be doing is checking those tires. After a couple of months sitting in the garage, tubeless tires can look okay, but inside the tire, there can be problems. Fresh sealant and a check on the rim tape is a good call, and it could prevent some real problems when you first get back on the dirt.
That rim tape in particular can reach up and bite you right in the middle of an important training ride. Now, I know switching out tubeless rim tape is kind of a pain. You got to pull and stretch and get it on just right. So we're going to tell you to grab some Envy rim tape. That's right, Envy. They made a great carbon wheel, and they have some great tubeless tape to match.
Yep, don't use anything else. In fact, match is a real key in that term. When you go to the Envy website and find their tubeless tape, scroll down the page and check the nice chart Envy has laid out. It's going to match the correct width tape with the Envy wheels that you have. So, like for me, I have the M5 wheels. Therefore, I get the 29.5 millimeter tape.
It's pretty amazing. Envy has 7 different widths of tape for its various carbon tubeless wheels. And I have the stuff as well. It goes on way easier than any other tape I've used. And if you are uncertain about how to apply tubeless tape, Envy has some great follow-along instructions.
Yeah, Envy does everything with this obsession to detail that makes them our favorite wheels. While you're at it, maybe grab some fresh valve stems too. I always keep a half dozen or so in my toolbox just in case you get some gunk in there and you just want to pull out the valve stem, or maybe it's bent, time to replace it. Easy to do. Check out Envy's tubeless accessories at Envy, that's ENVE.com.
What is a good strategy for staying ahead of the cutoff times?
What do the experts say about sleeping effectively at altitude, and what do you each do?
For Leadville, hardtail or full suspension?
Yeah, good question.
All right, something new for season 6, something we will do, I think, most shows, and that is answering your questions. You know, between Fatty and I, we have 35 years of Leadville experience, so we feel somewhat qualified to field a few Leadville questions.
35 years. Holy cow, Hottie. When will we ever learn? This segment is for the first timer, more or less, who has questions about the course, crewing, nutrition, equipment, the town, anything. You can submit questions on our Slack channel or reach out to us on the Leadville 100 Mountain Bike Participants page on Facebook. There's a great chance that questions are going to be answered directly on those sites, which is great. We love the audience feedback that we always see. But we're also going to be sharing that knowledge here so a wider audience can take in the advice and hopefully use that toward a successful trip to Leadville.
So here we go with our LFAQ, I guess we're calling it, our Leadville Frequently Asked Questions. And our first comes from a Slack regular and a solid contributor to the discussion on that site, and that is Jeff Diefenbach. I think Jeff knows the answer to the question he's asking, but it's a good discussion anyways. And he asks, how should you map out your pre-ride plans for a person who is arriving 2 weeks in advance or a person arriving 1 week in advance?
All right. I'm going to take a crack at this one first, Hottie. I'm going to start with the caveats. I'm not a coach. I don't even play one on this podcast. So if you have a coach, do what the coach is telling you to do. But here is what I like to do, because like for a lot of you, Leadville is not just a race. Leadville is also my vacation. So if you've got 2 weeks, get all of your course anxiety out of the way in the first few days and then start resting. Here's what I like to do. On the day I get to Leadville, before I unpack even, I go ride up Keevans, down Mayqueen, up Hagerman's, and down the power line, then just pavement back to my car. That sounds like a lot. It is a lot. It makes you want to rest, and that is a good thing. The next day, I park at the fish hatchery and then ride up the power line and then back down. After that, I am done doing big rides. From then on, if I have a mountain bike itch that I got to scratch, I go to do some of the college trails. A lot of racers don't even know about the amazing single track network next to it's a mining school. What do you remember what it's called, Hottie? The
Colorado School of the Mines or for the mines?
It's something like that. It has something to do with mines. There's only one college in town, and there's a lot of great single track right from the parking lot trailhead. Or go to this nice, brand new little network of trails that have been recently built up by Turquoise Lake. These are highly recommended because there is very little climbing on these. They just kind of skirt around and near the lake. They're short little loops. They connect up. They're a lot of fun. And if you really want to go do something fun, go to Breckenridge for a day trip and ride some of the gorgeous single track off the Colorado Trail. But honestly, mostly rest. Start thinking in terms of riding around the Mineral Loop as the distance that you ride.
I was going to say Mineral Belt Loop too. Although, look, there's some climbing there too, folks. So it's not like a casual jaunt around Leadville. You go uphill there too. In fact, our friend Josh Portner, who made his first trip to Leadville last summer, said he brought a bike, and he was very surprised as he started heading up towards that Mineral Loop, how hard it was just to get out of town and get up towards the east side of things there in Leadville. Mine will be quick here. You know, I would think with a week out, if you're there a week in advance, I'd really put a question mark by Columbine. I know a lot of people want to go up and check out Columbine. They want to see how steep it really is, how hard it really is, where the turnaround really is. Put a big question mark by Columbine. You probably don't need to go up that sucker. Leave it alone.
Yeah, I would agree with you actually on that. You know, everyone wants to know about Columbine. I would say instead of going and riding Columbine, put on some hiking shoes, pack a picnic, Go to where the goat trail begins in your car. Then park your Jeep or whatever. Go walk to the turnaround, because let's be honest, walking it is going to be how most of us experience that part of the course on race day.
The only other thing I would add to what Fatty said about being there a week in advance is when you're doing power line, try to do it in the morning. I've said this before on the show. Do it in the morning. In other words, try to descend that thing in the morning so you get an idea about the sunlight and the dust conditions there. I think that's, a pretty key thing. But again, I wouldn't worry about riding up power line a week in advance. The thing is just too hard. You'll just be buried for 2 days after riding that thing. So, but get a look at the descent. I think that's a good idea. It's one of the first big obstacles you have to face, right? Because Sugarloaf is not that hard of a climb, but the power line descent can trip up people, flats, weird things happen up there. So in the morning, check out that power line descent. This is a week in advance. 2 weeks out, okay, maybe Columbine then, maybe ride it, or maybe ride the lower section. But again, just be careful. Like, bad things can happen at elevation, at height. There's a lot of speed up there when you turn around and come back down. So I would consider adding Columbine if I'm there 2 weeks in advance, and then Powerline inbound at that point. Maybe I go have a look at the lower section if I feel like I have the legs. If you're a better rider, say you're looking for a gold buckle, do you have the legs to clean that lower section? And then maybe check out the upper section while you're at it. What are some of those turns like going back uphill? How hard is that going to be going home? And while you're at it, you can obviously do the Sugarloaf descent then as well, which is very bumpy as you approach Hagerman. So I start adding some of those segments if I'm there 2 weeks in advance. In both cases, whether it be a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance, go recon the feed zones. I know that's not riding, but go and take your crews out to the feed zones and have a look at how those are, where you hope to be, where they are in relation to your race that day, what side you think you might want to be on. So recon the feed zones as well. If I'm there either a week in advance, if I'm there a day in 2 days in advance, I'm probably going to recon the feed zones.
That is such valuable advice. I can't be done here yet. I got to say, for the part about if you're here for a week in advance, I sort of want to say, what are you doing, man? You should not be coming necessarily to Leadville 1 week in advance. You aren't going to acclimate to the altitude in a week. What you're going to do instead is you're going to be basically bottomed out acclimation-wise. Everyone that we have talked to has basically said a week is about the worst amount of time you can be in Leadville before you do the race. Come in just a day or two before if you're going to do the race, or come out a couple of weeks if you really are going to be wanting to get acclimated. So, maybe unpopular opinion, and the fact is I come out a week before the race all the time because it's not always necessarily about being the fastest you can be. It's about having a great time and doing a bucket list event. So make your own decisions on that. Also, follow me on Strava. I have 10 years or more worth of Strava week before rides, and it's super easy to see what I actually do in Leadville the week and two before the race.
Okay, Josh on our Slack channel asks, does the weight of your bike really matter? Or better yet, how important is weight of your bike? He said he could spend $2,000 and save about a half pound on his bike. Is that worth it, he asks. I will lose some extra body weight, but should I be worried about an extra pound or two on my bike? Well, Josh got a couple of direct answers on our Slack channel there, where he was told to focus on the less expensive solution, and that is his body weight and his power to weight ratio, which is sound advice, and I agree with all that. But I'm going to take kind of the devil's advocate here, the opposite point of view here for a minute, and say, yeah, I think weight on your bike does matter. Look, my Leadville bikes were never tanks. I made a point of having a good carbon, high-end carbon bike, usually an S-Works hardtail from Specialized, and I focused on building a good set of wheels that were light, right? And I looked at my tires and my tire makeup and how much weight I was carrying around on that bike. I had a carbon crankset and carbon bars. So I think weight, you don't want to intentionally go out there with a tank, right? You don't want to. I remember I had a problem with a bike in Leadville one. I discovered a crack in my frame, and a fellow there found me a bike. It came out of Salida or something like that, but it was a beast. Like, I thought, there's no way I'll be able to do anything on this thing. It was a nice bike, but it was just a tank. And eventually I got a comparable machine that was light. And I say this not because there's this huge performance advantage, but I think state of mind wise, that placebo effect that Fatty we've talked about before on the Marginal Gains podcast, that does say a lot. Like, it puts you in the right frame of mind. I'm a racer. I have a race bike. I mean business. And so I think a light bike can do more than just be light as in it's less weight to carry, but it means something to your psyche as well. And that's why I always like being on a real racy light machine.
I want to disagree with you, but I can't. The placebo effect is real. And I mean, if you look at me and the bikes that I've brought to Leadville year after year, there's clearly I don't know if obsession is a good enough word, because whatever comes next after obsession is more like how I am. But I love obsessing over the really great, really light equipment. I ride with Shimano XTR. I ride with NV wheels. Obviously, there is more to it than just that I like good equipment. I love the best equipment. It's not like I can never buy a Ferrari, but I can buy the best mountain bike out there, right? So it kind of has to do with that. But all that said, if you're going to buy expensive gear to save a gram here and there, you got to promise me one thing, that you are going to train with it. Don't just race with it. Because even very expensive light gear has a tendency to fail a little more often. Don't be like Dave Wiens putting untested carbon fiber rotors on your bike the night before the race. We had that in the show. One of the best stories I've ever heard. Second, lightest is no longer obviously the fastest. This year, I am going to be planning to race with a full suspension bike and a dropper post. We got to talk about that sometime soon. It'll be 2 or 3 pounds heavier than an equivalent hardtail high poster, but I am confident it is going to pay dividends in my descending times and reduced fatigue on the flats and climbs. And third, light is not everything. For more than a decade, I did whatever it took to weigh under 150 pounds. I'm talking about me, not my bike, on race day. And I never broke 9 hours. Then I started focusing more on my training, on knowing how to eat for 8 hours on my bike, and pit stopping like an endurance racer, and I knocked an hour off my time. Weight, how much you weigh and how much your bike weighs, are a small piece of a very big puzzle.
Yeah, so I think what we're saying here, Josh, is just prioritize. Like, yes, get in shape. Get in the best shape you can. Yes, dial in your nutrition. Know how that's going to work to a T for you. But third, dial your bike and get a bike that fits your budget and also is as fast as you can make within your budget. If that means making a light bike, make a light bike, because it will help you with your peace of mind as you go tearing around Leadville. And good luck this season in 2023. Say hi to us, too, if you see us in Leadville, and show us that light bike. We'll pick it up. We'll do what everyone does in the parking lot. Nice bike. And they pick it up by the top. Oh, yeah, like we all have scales built into our arms, right? We can all tell how light your bike is and how fast you're going to go. All right, that was a great first round. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. We couldn't get to them all, but for sure, you will see direct answers from us or other members of our Slack channel. Go to leadville.fm/Slack to sign up. And, of course, the Leadville 100 participants page.
Yep, and thanks again. We're going to be checking both of those locations for future questions. Keep them coming.
Alan Lim, the man behind Scratch Labs, made a name for himself by hydrating and feeding the world's fastest cyclists, Pro Tour riders. One of his notable fueling strategies was to make from scratch rice cakes. I've actually had one made by Alan, and it was delicious. I also have made those rice cakes myself using Lim's recipe. And while I'm a pretty good cook, the rice cake was a bit too much work for me.
I love Alan Lim's rice cakes. His portable cookbook, fantastic book. But it's not for everyone, right? Maybe it's for me, maybe not for you. But we are really glad to find on the Feeds website a bike treat from scratch that closely resembles Alan's rice cakes. They are the crispy rice cakes, kind of like Mom used to make from Rice Krispie cereal. Unlike Mom's, Alan's ingredients are put together with a day on the bike in mind instead of a day in the playground.
Right. The Sport Crispy Rice Cake is made with a blend of perfectly puffed rice and toasted grains, including brown rice, long grain rice, red rice, and quinoa, held together by heavenly, fluffy marshmallow. This tasty blend of simple and complex carbs packs 180 calories, which is enough to keep most athletes going full speed for an hour. They're light and easy to digest and will bring back memories of your favorite childhood snack, only more sophisticated.
I am going to have to try one of those on a climb. I frankly have a hard time imagine swallowing a rice treat while I am dying on a climb. But who knows? Alan Lim obviously knows what he's doing. And the feed is obviously the best place to get your nutrition you're going to train with and race with. It's easy, it's automatic, and they have great prices. The feed is the largest online marketplace for athletes to shop sports nutrition, high-performance supplements, and recovery race gear. So make your workout even better with the feed.
Claim your $80 annual credit at thefeed.com/Leadville. Register your email, verify your phone number, then spend your first feed credit of $20 right away.
You know, this is the hardest part of the season for me. It has been a really rough one for me. How do you know that? Putting down the fork, meaning the fork I eat with, not my mountain biking fork, putting on my cycling shoes and starting to prep for that 105 miles in the Colorado Rocky Mountains.
So to help Fatty and all of us get moving, and not only get moving, but get moving with purpose, we have brought back friend of the show, Jonathan Lee of Trainer Road. Jonathan is a Leadville vet who has helped thousands of riders get ready for their Summer A events. But it all begins with a winter thaw and getting out of a mental fog.
Jonathan Lee, Trainer Road. My goodness, we have known each other for 10 plus years. I think you've been on the show more than anyone else. Welcome. It is great to have you back.
Yeah, happy to be back with the Leadville family and with you all. It's exciting.
I'm coming to you as a you're my priest. I have a confession to make here. I am having a rough winter. I don't think I am that unusual here. A lot of snow in Utah. It is very difficult for me to find motivation to train, to eat right. Is that weird? Is that?
No, not at all. It's something that we all face as athletes. And at times you'll even notice it, not just when circumstances seem logical to prepare such an environment. You know, sometimes it's, in the middle of your training plan, you're getting close to your event and everything's great. And sometimes motivation wanes. It's tough for sure. But the winter time in particular is one where it's really difficult to conjure that up. Yeah, absolutely.
So here's my question. I don't know. Maybe it's just up to me to get the passion back, the motivation back, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. Maybe there is a science way to do this. And if there is, you would know. But how do I get the energy back, the motivation back, and then how do I get myself back into a good track for being able to get a good finish in Leadville this year?
Yeah, I think you first have to start with what the vision is for the individual. If the vision is to go have another good day at Leadville, well, for you, Eldon, this will be your 25th time. So, instead I would make it more specific in one way or another, and instead find something that motivates you. And this is just for Eldon's case, but for all of us, if we don't have something that truly motivates us about that we're working toward, which chances are, if you're listening to this, you're motivated for Leadville. But if you're doing it multiple times and you're searching for something new, you do have to find something that sparks excitement and joy amidst all of it. Now, this is what works for me, and it's separate probably for everybody, but hopefully this, at least just take this as my perspective with a hefty salt lick on the side instead of a grain of salt. But if I waited for motivation to do things, I wouldn't do a whole lot, particularly with training. I'm the sort of person that I need to have a goal and a vision that does excite me. And then after that, I need a framework in place or something that I know that if I commit to this process, that things will work out in the end. Because if I just rely on just motivation itself to be the thing that gets me onto that bike and doing the workouts, then it's just never enough. I just have to have pre-commitment to the process. And it isn't as soulless as it sounds. Typically, once I get, 5-10 minutes into that workout, then I start to find it again. but it disappears afterward, and it might disappear overnight, and it's tough to get back on the bike the next day. So it's, for an athlete like Eldon that we're listening to here that's done Leadville 25 times, I think it's super powerful to hear you admit the fact that your motivation isn't perfect all the time, and it doesn't motivate you to train all the time. This is real life, and that's how it works. And again, for me, I have to find a goal that truly excites me, and then I have to have a process in place that I'm committed to. So then that way I don't just have to rely on motivation.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly right. I know that by the time I get to June, I'm going to be excited and motivated, and I'm going to be caring deeply again about doing this race. It is in 20, I've had 25 starts, but this will hopefully be my 25th finish. I am never not excited for this race. It will happen. It's the delta between now and then that is kind of the trick sometimes, right? It is so easy to think in terms of, it is 7.5 months away. I can train hard. I can train effectively in February, in March, in April. And suddenly it's June and you're like,
Yes. Sneaks up on you really fast. Look, like relying on human physiology, fitness compounds to a certain degree. Like it builds upon itself. We don't have this entirely linear relationship. And if it was only so neat as to say that every 1 week of work equaled 3 watts increase in your FTP, that would be wonderful, but it's simply not. The one thing that we do know is that if you are laying a good foundation with base training, that's going to take you probably somewhere around, 10 weeks at the least, but it's probably going to take you somewhere closer to 12 weeks, maybe even a bit more. If you lay a foundation of base, then that builds a lot of aerobic fitness, and that aerobic fitness is built and ready to be able to be expanded. It's like, the foundation has been shored up. It's all been retreated. It's ready to go. And then as you start to build on top of that with training that's a bit more intense, then you can raise your threshold. And then the coolest part about that is that you don't arrive at June with all the motivation and suddenly not the fitness, but you actually arrive with the fitness. So then what you can do is you can fine tune things and really let that excitement build up rather than that anxiety build for the remaining months that you have going into the event. So in other words, long story short, we have to remember that building fitness takes time. Even for those of us that have many years of training history, building fitness still does take time, especially the sort of fitness that you will need to complete such a long day as Leadville.
As we record this, Jonathan, some folks have just received notice that they're in the Leadville Trail 100. Many of the people who listen to this podcast are first-time Leadvillers, or maybe it's their second go at it. So right now they're feeling a real sense of urgency, like I got to get going now. So it sounds like what you're saying, that the parameters as I remember them for getting ready for a big event have not changed too much. You start with, your long, slow distance, you build that base, that foundational base, and then you gradually become more specialized with your training as you get nearer and closer to your event. That said, for the person who is feeling that sense of urgency, and I got to go out and ride right now, and I got to start logging 6, 7, 8 hour rides, you would say what?
I would say don't worry about that, particularly when you're looking at a long day. Remember, you don't have to emulate or recreate that long day beforehand. We talk about training energy systems at Trainer Road. The energy systems that you'll use on that course, on that day, are what matters. And interestingly, when you look at what you can hold in terms of like your power, what you can hold for 10 hours, it's actually remarkably similar to what you can hold for 4 hours. And 5 hours. Your body can really stretch that out. As the duration gets shorter and shorter, that changes. The relationship isn't linear, once again. But what you can do for 3 or 4 hours, you can do for 10. And as a result, you don't have to worry about going out and doing these big rides right now, riding super hard. I think our CEO is a great example of this. Nate, he didn't have a lot of time to train for Leadville in terms of day-to-day training time. I think the longest workout he did was it 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours coming into Leadville. And he was set, I think, to go sub 8. But then I, as a terrible crew member, didn't I did not put his hydration pack in the cooler, and instead I just threw it in the vehicle, and it was like hot, sticky Martin. And I
Actually simmering.
Yes, and I gave that to him before he went up power line. And at some point somebody said, I saw your friend and he was just laying on his back on power line. So it did not go well. So I sabotaged his day, and I feel terrible about it. But he probably would have gone sub 8 with just 2 hours. And there's David Curtis, an athlete that I spoke to on a separate podcast, where he did the similar thing. He didn't have to go out and emulate these long rides. Sergio Sandoval is another athlete that did the same thing. Kate McLaughlin, another rider. So you don't have to replicate the distance, and you also don't have to replicate the intensity, particularly right now. But remember, that intensity you're going to do on Leadville, it isn't really exciting intensity. What's exciting is as you get closer and closer to meeting your goal on race day, that's the cool part. That's the exciting thing that you're building toward.
So many of us are used to putting on, those longer rides. We won't call them 6-7 hour rides, but the 3-4 hour ride is still obviously a great ride. Can we start building the space indoors effectively? The same as we would outdoors? Yeah,
absolutely. And there's a way to get, so the whole point of base training is to build aerobic fitness, but keep in mind, you'll be creating your power aerobically up to your threshold, at which point you start to tip into using more anaerobic stores. That's where you get into like VO2 max, and then above that anaerobic, and above that even sprint. So anything below threshold, in theory and in practice, scientific practice, builds aerobic conditioning. And it actually does a better job of building aerobic conditioning as the intensity increases. So the question then has to be asked, why don't you just ride at threshold all day? And the answer is, well, nobody is that much of a masochist. First of all, we're not capable of doing it. It would feel terrible. But there's this thing where you can drop down below your threshold zone and you can ride in a zone that's called sweet spot. And it's much maligned by narratives like the polarized training narrative and everything else, which is an absolutely valid way to train. And if you have a lot of time, it can work quite well. It's more challenging if you don't have a lot of time. But it's much maligned by this. But this sweet spot training zone it hits, quote, the sweet spot of not working you so hard so that your next day's workout isn't completable. But instead what it does is it maximizes the amount of aerobic adaptations that you would, or aerobic stress that you're dosing your system with, and the aerobic adaptations you could make by having you work at higher percentages of your aerobic threshold. So that typically is going to look, you're going to be riding somewhere in the 80% range of your threshold roughly for sweet spot. And it's the sort of intensity that it is not threshold, and it's notably not threshold. Threshold is when you start to feel everything load up, and it's like a ticking time bomb. Instead, this is that sort of pace where you're on the gas, and it's uncomfortable. It's not a great place to, it's not just a spot where you can read ebooks while you're training at this pace, probably. It's not going to be that comfortable. But it's certainly something that's sustainable. You should be able to do sweet spot work as you build up into it. You should be able to do this for sustained periods of time. We're talking, very large portions of an hour. You should be able to maintain at least some percentage of that as you work your way into it. And that's, I think, a really great way, particularly for a lot of folks that do Leadville. We're average people. There's those people in the Gold Corral, and I don't mean to disparage them by calling them those people, but they likely have very different circumstances than you and I. And we have jobs, or we have families, or we have other responsibilities. And in that case, you just have to look at getting that aerobic base in other ways other than just going out and riding your bike for a really, really long time.
By the way, folks, polarized training, or you can remind me, Jonathan, remind folks what polarized training is. It's basically you work a small portion of your training week at a very high intensity level, and then the rest is a very easy level, something like that. I've never done it, but that's the way it's been described.
Yes. So the theory behind it is that you spend roughly 80% of your training days. Well, there's two. This is a very, it gets confusing because it has never been communicated clearly enough. But there's two main ways to look at it. Either 80% of your training days are easy and 20% are hard, or 80% of your training time is easy and 20% is hard. The concept behind this is that if you make all those other days easy, that then it will allow you to work harder on those hard days than you would otherwise. And that this combination allows you to be able to build good fitness. Anecdotally, I've done and I've tested out different variations of polarized training over the last 2.5 years. Anecdotally, It does a good job of building aerobic fitness for myself. It doesn't do a good job of preparing me for races. That's a bit tougher. The tricky part with it too, that's
Why do you suppose that is? Because it's too much high end?
not enough. And also
Not enough high end.
yeah,
okay.
in some cases, or perhaps not specific enough. If you look at what you do in most races, Leadville's really unique. Leadville, you're spending 70 to 75% of your threshold. That's where you should be for the day. If you look at most races that people do, you're going to be spending you're probably going to be somewhere in 85% or more, that gray zone that polarized training tries to avoid. And there is a benefit to specificity in training those energy systems you use on race day. And if you aren't used to it, it gets a bit more difficult. But the interesting thing is that it's still very much, it's a valid approach. There's so many different ways to skin the cat. But it does tend to get very difficult if you can only train a certain amount of time per week. You start to look at that and you're like, oh geez, so actually I can only spend 18 minutes of my training going hard all week. And that's it, because that's just the time I have, right?
Yeah, if you're polarized. Yeah, this is polarized training.
Yeah,
folks,
exactly.
To talk about here. Yeah, 18 minutes a week. Yeah,
Maybe you have 20 hours a week, and you suddenly look at that and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to be spending a huge amount of my time at high intensity. So there's kind of this premise that it's very neatly divided and cut up, and in reality, it's not. It's another way to skin the cat. Contrary to popular belief, it's not the thing that all pro athletes use to train. In fact, the majority of them, I would say, don't follow an 80-20 prescription. But the principle behind it is you go easy on your easy days and you go hard on your hard days. And that's a principle that's applied to any training plan, and it should be applied to any training plan no matter what. Follow the goal of the workouts.
I want to play devil's advocate real quick here, though, and we'll use Fatty as an example. So Fatty's planning right now. He's the bear. He's coming out of hibernation. We're waking him up. He's growling. He's hungry. And we're going to send him out for some, we're going to refresh his endurance a little bit, send him out for, 10 weeks or so of just some good old-fashioned endurance riding. And then obviously he's going to start ramping that up and do more sweet spot work, right? Because that's what he's going to be racing at Leadville. Is there any reason, though, that Fatty should be planning for some high-intensity work, the stuff we would see in polarized training? Like, should he be trying to raise his maximum speed level just because you're trying to, what's the saying? Rising tides raise all ships or something like that. Is there any argument here for that with regards to his training?
Right now, no, not a whole lot. As you get closer to it, yes, you will want to do higher intensities than you'll do at Leadville, regardless of whatever sort of format you're following with your training plan. At first, you won't need to. And the reason that you won't want to do that is because you don't want to accrue a lot of fatigue. And that sort of specificity isn't going to make a big difference yet. You want to be able to establish a strong foundation of aerobic fitness first. So there's really not a whole lot of benefit to going too hard right now. There's just a lot of potential drawbacks to it. If you think of it from the perspective of asymmetric risk, what's the likely, or what is the risk profile, and what's the likelihood of negative versus positive risk? And in this case, it's much more beneficial and a safer bet to focus on building aerobic training.
So let me tell you what I actually am doing right now. I've got this program, this app. You might have heard of it. It's called TrainerRoad's.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I love it.
Jonathan knows. I would love to have you look it up sometime. I think I've been with you guys for about a decade. So a good long time, but it has changed. I used to go downstairs to where I have my, back then, a Wahoo Kicker, now a Tax Neo 2T, and I would spend probably more time figuring out what workout I was going to do than I did working out. Nowadays, I go down and there is a feature called Train Now, and it just tells me it gives me a choice. Which of 3 workouts would I like to do? I've got an hour, then I got to get going to my commute to work, which is 20 feet away because I work from home a lot. But it's, in any case, I just hit the Train Now. And because of the motivation thing, I more often hit the easiest of the 3 options. Right now in mid-January, am I doing myself any good, or am I doing myself harm, or somewhere in between?
Oh, I'd say from So, well, this actually kind of goes into a topic. A lot of people ask us, what's the best training plan, or what's the one that gives the most improvement? And the answer is the one you do. And I know that sounds silly, and that sounds inspecific, but even right now, we're collecting data, for example, on those polarized training plans that we've introduced, and on other training plans, we're always collecting data, and we always look at the how they compare. And we need more data on the polarized plans. And those people are cross-listening to this right now and posting in our forum about it. We need more data on the polarized plans to really draw strong conclusions. But in every case, the fact is people get better when they adhere to their plan. People don't get better when they don't adhere to the plan. Now, in your case, even though you don't have a training plan, let's look at what's actually happening. It's are you getting on the bike consistently? And so in that case, I would say you're doing incredible things for your training, because you found a model right now that allows you to get on the bike and get your training done and start rebuilding these habits of consistency. And that's really what we need to be able to then tolerate a training plan, is we need to have that framework in place and that motivation in place, like we said in the beginning, to be able to do it regularly. Now, would you benefit from changing things up and working, like you said, on Train Now? It gives you an endurance ride. It gives you a climbing ride, which is like sustained power. And then it gives you an attacking ride, which is going to be like VO2 max. And it's really great for just dropping in and picking a workout. It doesn't drive your fitness in any specific sort of direction. But it does use our AI, which is really cool, to analyze what you've been doing. If you've been just riding outside, and like we look at that and it says, ooh, yesterday was a hard day for Eldon when he went out and he went fat biking or something. So as a result, today he should be recommended an easy workout. Or yesterday wasn't that hard, we can recommend something else. So it's cool how that works. But I would think that, yeah, you could benefit from picking a climbing workout every once in a while instead of the endurance ones. But if you ever hesitate for that, just pick the endurance one, because the more important thing is to have the habit of consistency. And if you have that habit of consistency, then you can step into creating the sort of specificity that you need to build the sort of specific fitness that you want.
Yeah, any workout's better than none. And I really am. I mean, I've been a fan of Trainer Road forever, but the lowering of barriers to turning, that first turn of the crank that you've recently done, and also eliminating FTP tests. Oh, man. Oh man, I love you guys for that.
Yeah, let's talk quickly about what Trainer Road has done. Last year, you folks were talking about adaptive training a lot. Jonathan, what's new on Trainer Road this year?
Yeah, so AI FTP detection, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It uses AI to detect your FTP. It's been really cool. We've been training this for years now and building up our AI to be able to recognize when you have changes in your fitness that warrant an FTP change. And it's really cool how it works. In some cases, like other apps or services have done this, and what they do is they look for when you have a really high 20-minute power, for example, or when you do like a 20-minute stable effort and your heart rate reached max, then they'll say, okay, that looks like something that I can use to calculate their FTP. They'll reduce it by 5% and give you a figure. They might do that for 8 minutes or something like that. Ours it's so cool. It uses AI, and it doesn't even need you to do an all-out effort. Alden will just be doing his aerobic rides right now, and it will actually recognize the fact that, okay, knowing Alden as an individual athlete and seeing all the training he's ever done, then also understanding Alden's context as a male of this sort of age, and then looking at the sort of things that he's been doing recently, I actually know that even though Alden isn't doing any all-out efforts, his FTP has gone up from this to this. And it's using a database of over 150 million rides and over 25 million Trainer Road rides that have been completed to be able to understand all of this and how all of us get faster. It's incredible, and it's so cool. And it's probably one of the biggest things, like you said, removing barriers to training. That is one of our foremost goals, is to make it so that you can get faster, and that getting faster is a process that's more natural for you. If we get to the point where we're introducing barriers one after another, which is quite common in the training world, you need to prick your finger every 5 minutes to get your lactate. That's the thing to do. You don't need to do all this other stuff, or you need to follow a really complex protocol, or you need to do these things. And it's not the case. The work you do is what makes you faster. And getting rid of FTP tests is honestly one of the best things we can do for that, because some people love it, But the vast majority of people, they dread those things. And also, they don't get a good number on that FTP test because maybe it's testing anxiety. Just being good at testing is a skill. And, if that's going to affect your training adversely, that's a problem. So that's why we built it, and it's just so cool.
I will say I used to not be able to sleep the night before I did an FTP test because I got every bit as much race anxiety for my FTP test as I did for, not for Leadville, that's kind of a different category, but for a local but important day on a local course, right? It's amazing, how you invest yourself in those numbers. And my wife simply wouldn't do them, right? Lisa would simply not do an FTP test because it's like you say, she wasn't great at that ramp test, and it would consistently give her an FTP that when applied to her regular training just felt like it was insulting to her, right? She was stronger than that. And so not having that now has been, a real plus to her use of TrainerRoad. I will say that. One
cool way that it works together with adaptive training, our AI that manages all of your training, is after you get that test, let's say that, you're Eldon and you're really good at those short, hard, punchy efforts, probably because of all your single speeding over the years, but you're really good at those short, hard, repeated efforts, but you're not good at the steady state longer stuff. It doesn't matter. Typically beforehand, or if you followed like complex protocols that try to grade you in every single system like that, and then that's what you get, you are stuck to those levels. But what this does is it gives you the FTP, but then every single energy system, your endurance, your sweet spot, your tempo, your threshold, your VO2, they're all handled separately. So that way you can improve at the rates that you need, and you're not just locked into your FTP defining your abilities across the board. It's really cool. So it's all handled separately with adaptive training. It's neat. No more tests, death to tests. So,
but you can do one if you want to. And occasionally, there are people like me, and because I do. There's the anxiety, but that's anxiety is just one lens on excitement and hope for accomplishment. I love hitting, if I can, tipping over into a new number, and the sheer, I guess, intensity of it. Obviously, there is something in there for me. Not for everyone, though. I'm just saying you don't have to do it, but you still can if you want to.
Absolutely worth reiterating. You can do a ramp test. You could do a 20-minute test. You could do a 2x8. You could just plug in whatever number you want manually too. So it's not like, it's not like AI is fully behind the wheel and you're along for the ride. You can take control too if you'd like. It's up to you.
That gives me an idea. I had to plug in Keegan's FTP and try doing a workout.
Oh, it's a wild trip.
With that, just to see exactly how different of a human being he is than I am.
And then let's all drop down to 130 pounds and try to do that too. It's just insane. It's just incredible. And Hannah Otto is another great example too. Just their numbers are just they're impressive athletes. So
it's amazing to watch them, and also nice to know that well, we don't have to be like that, and we can still have a good day out on the court.
Bikes can still be fun.
Yep. Jonathan, I feel more motivated than I did 20 minutes ago. It is always great talking with you, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You're better than you think you are. You can do more than you think you can. Dig deep, dig deep.
Again, big thanks to Jonathan Lee. If you are looking for a training plan, I cannot say enough good things about TrainerRoad. This program has helped me not only get ready for Leadville, but prepare for dozens of events over a decade plus, I think. TrainerRoad's program is not just easy to use. It is fantastic, but right now, easy to use matters a lot. You just put in the race and the date. TrainerRoad does most of the everything else. You got to do the pedaling, of course, but TrainerRoad tells you how much, how hard, and when.
It may seem like a long way to Leadville, but it is not too early to start thinking about what you will be wearing on race day, especially if you want to wear a custom kit. And Fatty and I say you do want to wear something that you designed.
Yeah, standing out visually is one of our key Leadville tips. This is a drum we beat often. Race day is kind of a shock when it comes to the density of people on the course. And we all kind of look the same in the helmet, sunglasses, tight clothing. So if you're racing with someone and you have family and friends helping you, it is really important and helpful to stand out. And with DNA custom apparel, you standing out also means that you are looking good.
Yeah, DNA has a bunch of colorful jerseys to choose from. And if yellow or pink are not your thing, then DNA can do logos and patterns that attract the eye. And again, that's the point. You want to be seen so your riding buddies can find you, so your crew can see you coming. And we shouldn't forget, so the many photographers on course can get a good picture of you.
Oh yeah, it's all about the photo. For an example of this standout quality, check out our very recent Leadville podcast kits. Just go look me up on the Leadville results over the last 3 races. Check out the kit. This is DNA's work. Then head over to DNA Cycling and start planning your own design. Go to dnacycling.com to learn more. And be sure to tell them that the Leadville podcast sent you.
All right, we're going to wrap this episode now. Again, thanks to Jonathan Lee for his expertise and to the listeners who submitted questions.
Absolutely. Again, we have a Slack channel, leadville.fm/Slack, where we are gathering questions. And of course, on the Facebook Leadville 100 mountain bike participants page is another place we go mining for your questions.
That's good. Mining for Leadville questions. I get it.
Sorry.
If you like this show, go to wherever you listen, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review to see all the ways you can find this independent show. It's leadville.fm.
Everyone, good luck with your riding. Good luck with your racing. If you've got early season races coming up, good luck with your recovery. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you real soon, sooner than you expect, at the starting line.